Just quickly, might be a bit of a repeat for some of you from last night, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Nadia Peterson and I'm in my final year here at college. And in December, I will be graduating as a primary teacher. I have been blessed enough this year to serve in the dorms as the head RA with the girls over in Ella. As you can see, we have a wide variety of talents and gifts and beautiful girls in dorms, and I just, on behalf of all of them, want to say thank you to your community for allowing our community to share with you this weekend. If you don't know any of them, please go and get to know them. They have so much to offer. So when I was thinking about what I was going to talk about today, I didn't realise that my mum was going to be coming to the area for a work thing to watch. And I was going to start by saying sometimes I should have listened to my mum. So I hope you all enjoy today watching me swallow a piece of humble pie in front of her. Pray for me. I don't know what may happen after. 2 times that stick out in my mind that I should have listened to my mum. First time, I was about 7 or 8, and you know the classic potluck lunch, gluten steak cook-up on the Friday night. Mum had been doing this, slaving away, boiling them, frying them, etc., and she was finally done, and of course, being the good mother she is, she let us all have a few before they went in the fridge. And I'd had 3, and Mum said, that is enough. Being the good Adventist girl I was, my soul was not satisfied with just 3. So Mum went to bed that night, 10 o'clock. I'd gone to bed as well, but I lay in bed, keeping my eyes open at the thought of just having maybe 1 or 2 more gluten steaks. I hear Mum's door close, and I'm like, now's my chance. So I sneak downstairs, go into the fridge, grab 2 more, sneak back up to my room, lay in bed, and munch away on these gluten steaks. Sure enough, about 3 or 4 hours later, I wake up in gut-wrenching pain. Sure enough, I have to approach my mother. Being 7 or 8, I'm not really sure how to deal with this monstrous stomachache I have. And without going into detail, out comes the white glove and that little white jelly bean that as children we sometimes had to swallow in a different direction to ease the pain. Should have listened. Second time. About 6 or 7 years later, I was 13 or 14, and I really wanted a pet budgie. But of course, what every classic parent move is you have to prove to me that you're responsible before you can get a pet. We all know that what that actually means is you get to be my slave for however long I decide, and you don't get to whinge about it. So Mum did that. Everything, oh, I need more milk on my cereal. Nadia, are you responsible? Yes, Mum. Anything else, Mum? And this went on for a few weeks, and eventually I proved to Mum that I was responsible enough to get a pet budgie. So off we went to this man at church who bred budgies, and I chose one, and I called him Sherbet. Now, I was one of those dorky girls back in primary school where I didn't have a lot of human friends, I had a lot of pet friends. And I had the posters of horses all up on my wall. I didn't actually own a pet horse, or nor had I ever really been in contact with a horse, but I thought it was pretty cool. And so I got this budgie Sherbet, and I trained him to do a whole bunch of things. So he would sit on my pencil as I'd do my homework, or he would just kind of walk around or follow my pencil, and I taught him to say, pretty boy. So he'd sit in his cage and be like, oh, pretty boy, and I thought I was pretty cool. As I got older, I saw less of a need for a relationship with a bird, and more of a need with a relationship with people, which I think is mostly natural. And so I started to neglect this poor little bird maybe just a little bit, and Mum would be on my case all the time. Have you fed Sherbet? And of course, because I didn't want to, get my pride in the way, I'd be like, yes, Mum, oh my gosh, I'm 13, I'm so responsible, when I hadn't actually fed him. And so then she'd go to bed and I'd quickly sneak downstairs and I'd fill up his thing and be like, ooh, that was a close one for the day. Not knowing that Mum was actually really onto it and had generally filled his feed up anyway. One day Mum came to me and she said, I'm not feeding him for you anymore. He's your responsibility. It's up to you. I was like, yeah, what are you on about? Seriously, I got this. It's just a bird. What's the worst that can happen? Children, adults, When you don't feed something, it dies. One day I was at my friend's house just hanging out. She was only about 2 minutes away, and I get this call. And it is like the wrath of hell is on the end of the line. And it's my mum. She's like, Nadia, you are coming home. I'm like, why? I've still got another 2 hours here. She's like, you are coming home. And my friend and I looked at each other because you know when you're in trouble. And so she picks me up, she drives me home, and she walks me out to the backyard where the big aviary is that he was living in. And there he is, claws up, on his back. Rest in peace, Sherbet. Should have listened to my mum. If you have your Bibles with me, I would like you to turn, if you have your Bibles with you, I would like you to turn to Jonah, chapter 1. Now, the thing with Jonah, I used to be real funny about going back to Bible stories that I'd kind of been born and raised on. But then I thought about it and I was like, well, if I like a piece of cake, I go back for another piece because it filled me and it satisfied me. Even though it tastes the same and looks the same, I still found it satisfying. So if you're finding that with some of the Bible stories, I really encourage you to go back to the ones that you may have heard, all your life and see what you can get out of them. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it because its wickedness has come up before me. Now, Nineveh in that time was actually the dominating empire of the time. So it wasn't like little old Kurrumbong. It was like comparing maybe Kurrumbong to New York. Is that big enough? Yeah? To New York. If you just quickly turn to the book of Nahum, chapter 3. So the book of Nahum actually is just telling you all about Nineveh and how wicked it was. Chapter 3, I'm going to read from the Message version. It says, doomed to murder city, full of lies, bursting with loot, addicted to violence. Horns blaring, wheels clattering, horses rearing, chariots lurching, horsemen galloping, brandishing swords and spears, dead bodies rotting in the street, corpses stacked like cordwood. Bodies in every gutter and alley, clogging every intersection, and whores without end, whore city. Fatally seductive, you're the witch of seduction, luring nations to their ruin with your evil spells. So you can see maybe why Jonah, as we go on, was hesitant to head there. Verse 3, but Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa where he found a ship bound for that port. After paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break. So this storm was huge. The ship was about to fall apart. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God. And then they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. But Jonah had gone below deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was running away from the Lord, I'm not sure that I would be able to sleep so comfortably, but Jonah seemed to think he'd gotten away, I think. The captain went to him and said, how can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us and we will not perish. Then the sailors said to each other, come, let us cast lots to find out who is responsible for this calamity. They cast lots and the lot fell on Jonah. So they asked him, tell us, who is responsible for making all this trouble for us? What do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you? He answered, I am a Hebrew and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land. So he's very, very aware of God's power. This terrified them and they asked, what have you done? They knew he was running away from the Lord because he had already told them so. The sea was getting rougher and rougher, so they asked him, what should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us? Pick me up and throw me into the sea, he replied, and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you. Instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Then they cried to the Lord, O Lord, please do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, O Lord, have done as you pleased. Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. At this the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. But the Lord provided a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was inside the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Last year, I was really lucky that I got to head over to Canada for my brother's wedding because he met a Canadian and then he decided to stay over there and get married over there. Now, on my way home, so I had to come back for college and my family went off and lived the life and, went around to some other places after that. On my way home, I was going from Canada to Los Angeles and then I was going to go from Los Angeles back here to Sydney. That day, there had been a shooting in LA airport, and then when I got there, there was a bomb scare as well. So quite a stressful day, to say the least. We had been pushed from gate to gate, we had been shoved to sit on the floor, things like that, while they figured things out. Finally, we got on the plane, after it had been delayed for almost 3 or 4 hours. We got on the plane and I sat down, and it was that golden moment when no one had filled the seats next to me. And I was like, yes, I've got the place to myself. Because I hate being in the middle anyway, especially if you want to fall asleep. Like, it's really awkward that you try not to sleep on the other person's shoulders. Someone came and he sat in the aisle seat. And I was like, cool, he's not talking to me. That's kind of what everyone secretly wants, even if they don't want to admit it. And then I was like, cool, I've got another spare seat. And we both kind of gave each other eyes like, let's hope this one's free so we can kind of split and then have a bit more room. This guy comes and he sits next to me. He's got this big hippie hair. And as he starts talking to me, I realise he's from New Zealand. And he is talking. And in my head, I'm like, oh, damn it, why do bad things happen to good people? Like, far out. Can I not just relax for like a minute? And you know how you've got a 14-hour flight ahead of you and someone starts talking and you're like, am I going to have to spend 14 hours, engaging in conversation? So he's chatting away, chat, this guy from New Zealand, just all sorts of things. I'm coming from Canada, I love sheep, blah, 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 just going on and on and on. And eventually the time comes and he goes, would you mind if I just went to the toilet? And I'm like, yes, here's my chance. And so I just kind of motioned to the guy next to me. I'm like, oh, this guy needs to get out. But this guy has plans of his own. And rather than waiting for us to move, he decides he's just going to climb over both of us. So I'm like, okay, cool, I can work with that. So he just climbs over us. We won't go there. And then I pretend to quickly fall asleep conveniently while he's gone to the bathroom. The next 14 hours, I go in and out of sleep. While I'm not asleep, I pretend to be asleep so I don't have to engage the state I'm in. In hindsight, probably wasn't the most Christian attitude, but you know what it's like when you're tired and you're flying and it's just blah. We get to the end of the flight and I wake up and he goes to me, hey, you're really good to talk to. Do you have a boyfriend? And it was that real awkward time where my boyfriend and I were not actually official yet. So I'm like, oh, do I? And I was like, no, because that's the truth. And he goes, oh, can I have your number? And I was like, oh. And I was like, no. Oh my goodness. You know how when a plane lands, it lands and that's fine, but then there's a good 15 to 20 minutes of just waiting. So I'm sitting there with this guy who I've just said no, and I'm just looking the other way, being like, he doesn't exist if I don't look at him right. This isn't awkward at all. Should I engage in conversation and say sorry and just be like, well, here's my number, but please don't contact me? That'd be stupid. And so I'm just sitting there looking the other way for 20 minutes while he's looking out the window, also pretending that this never happened. How often are we doing this to God? How often is he sitting right there and he's asked us of something, but we look the other way? It's like when you go to the supermarket and you see someone that you only kind of half know and you're like, oh, they haven't seen me yet. So if I just jump into this aisle, it's like we never met. Or it's like when you get that phone bill or the electricity bill and you can see by the envelope that you know what it's going to be, But until you open it, it doesn't exist, right? What is it that God is communicating with you that you're too afraid to look directly in the eye and acknowledge it? So often we think to ourselves, I don't have the beauty of Esther or the grace of Esther. I don't have the patience of Mary or the kind spirit of Ruth. I don't have the strength of Samson. God can't use me. It's lucky for us that God used the temper of Moses. And he used the denial of Peter, the doubts of Jonah. He used the anger of Saul. James and John, their reputation was the sons of thunder. It's lucky for us that our God, our perfect God, excels in working through imperfect humans. In verse 3, back in Jonah, where Jonah's about to run away, it says, after paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Notice how when Jonah was running in a different direction, choosing his own direction, he was the one who was actually paying the fare. He was the one who had to pay the price. But when he followed God's calling, God is the one who provided the way. Proverbs 19:21 says, you can make many plans, but the Lord's purpose will prevail. Turn your head. Whatever it is that he wants you to do, just remember that he's already paid the price for you to get there.